the beauty of the cinematography work that you did in shooting the story of these kite birds that are being saved one by one. It feels like a Sisyphean kind of project of the subjects of your film to save these birds, and yet it's very, very beautiful. You chose to do this film because why?
I was thinking a lot about the air. I think when you live in Delhi, you often think about the air. You're often preoccupied with the air. And I wanted to do something on the texture or tone of life in Delhi. You know, one is constantly, like air just forms a kind of wallpaper of our lives there. Apart from that, philosophically, I was interested in thinking of human-animal entanglement. And if I had to pinpoint one moment, it was this one day where Aman, who's sitting there, and I were sat in a car, and essentially we saw what looked like a bird fall off the sky. And you know, it's like in the winters when you go to the city, it's this classic image of this grey, monotone, monochromatic kind of an expanse in which there are these tiny black dots. And every now and then you have a sensation of, like, you know, like we felt like we saw one of those black kites plummeting. And we were just, like I was gripped by this figure of a bird that falls off a grey, polluted expanse. And we started looking into what happens when birds fall off the sky. And that's when we chanced upon the work of the brothers. And what they do is singular and remarkable. And, you know, for the last 15 years, they've treated almost 25,000 black kites in a tiny, grubby, decaying, industrialized basement.
It's crazy.
It's really, and it felt like there are 3 Don Quixotes, you know, who are trafficking in micro miracles. And, but most of all, I mean, we did not want to make a sweet film about nice people doing good things, but make something which was, you know, denser conceptually and cinematically and so on. But it was also a very cinematically dense space. So we were just very seduced by the form and the conceptual bulwark of it.
Nothing scale-wise farther than kind of the look on the children's faces in House Made of Splinters compared to Fire of Love, from the grander nature down to like the most granular human scale. You discovered this, it's not quite an orphanage, it's kind of like an orphanage, right? This place that takes care of children in eastern Ukraine, is that right?
Yeah, it's a state-run temporary shelter where they take kids for the 9 months that the state have to decide their case.
And how did you go from Copenhagen to find that story in that place and decide to spend your life working on that story?
Actually, it was before, it was my previous film, as kind of a result of that one. I started back in 2016 to document the lives of a young kid and his grandma living, you know, right on the edge of the trenches of the war in eastern Ukraine. And I got very close to this odd but very lovable couple. And in the later stages of shooting that film, which is called The Distant Barking of Dogs, the grandma got ill, and I was super worried that if she were to pass away, what would happen to her amazing young grandchild. Luckily she didn't, and she recovered, and they're doing great today. But that question, it couldn't kind of escape my mind. So when all of the things was done with this film, also in a way to kind of prepare myself, because it was a heart condition and no telling if it would be back again. We wanted to figure it out, what actually does happen to kids in this situation, and are there many kids in that situation where they're left without anybody really being able to take care of them.
You, as I mentioned, you're known for writing about for making films about political international political topics, and this is about the Mangold in your film, All the Beauty and the Bloodshed, and the artist and photographer and the Purdue Sackler family. So there, for you, there's a connection there, right? That's on a continuum with your work, or a break from your previous work?
Well, first of all, it's really wonderful to be here with these other nominees whose films I love. It's a really incredible group of films, and also unique and really coming from a position of artistry. So, yeah, the obvious through line for me was the kind of contemporary unfolding in real time battle of Mangold and taking on the Sackler family. That felt consistent, sort of looking at U.S. power. And so that was that was my entry into it. And then the different layers of the film emerged once I started working with Nan, who goes to places emotionally that a lot of people don't go to. And the sort of layering of her, more of her personal life, wasn't the first entry. It was more the contemporary piece of the
You made Fire of Love. It's about these two French volcanologists. What the heck? How did that start? It's like such a, I want to say random, but it's like, and it's so amazing. The footage is incredible, and the story that you weave together of their relationship is incredible. But where'd that come from?
Yeah, well, first I love the what the heck. That's kind of how I feel about them. They still feel like surreal characters to me, but they were very, very real. My team and I first got to know Katya and Maurice Kraft, our protagonists, actually when we were doing research for the last film I directed. That's a film entitled The Seer and the Unseen. It's the Verite documentary that takes place in Iceland, which is a volcanic island. And we think of Seer and the Unseen as a magically real documentary. We wanted to open it with footage that could really speak to this world of creation and destruction that volcanoes represent. And we started doing research on volcanic imagery and archives of erupting volcanoes in Iceland, and that's how we first learned about Katya and Maurice Kraft. We were so struck by the power of their imagery. There was nothing like it I'd seen before. So surreal and magical. But once we learned that they were a married couple in love with each other and so passionately in love with the earth, we thought that there was a real story here. And for me as a filmmaker, I'm really drawn to stories about the human relationship with non-human nature, especially stories that can kind of center like the sentience or the power of the natural world. And I also just delight in people, in human characters. And so in this kind of milieu, it seemed like everything I was always dreaming of in a story. These characters that have this kind of mythic love for each other and this elemental force. And the more we got to know them, the more excited we were to tell their story, specifically using the profound imagery.
Which really is totally lightning in a bottle that you documented this incredible historic figure before he was shut off to the whole world for we don't know how long. So from what I read, you started this project focusing on Bellingcat, this unbelievable set of rogue journalists. Laura can understand what that's about, right? Who were helping him solve the mystery of who had poisoned him?
Well, not exactly.
Not exactly. Okay, fix my
I had heard of Bellingcat. I knew what Bellingcat was. They're this great investigative journalist website, and they do these digital online investigations that are quite innovative and interesting. And I happened to be making a different film, working on a completely different story with one of the leads at Bellingcat, this guy called Christo Grozev. And Christo Grozev and one of the film's producers and myself, we were all in Ukraine working on a film there, but that film wasn't going anywhere, and we were very assertively encouraged to leave the country quickly, and we found ourselves in Vienna in October of 2020, when Christo very casually proclaimed one morning that he had stumbled upon a lead in the investigation into who tried to poison Navalny. And immediately, that was a light bulb moment. I knew exactly who this guy was, and I thought that this would be an extraordinary story. And so it was very much riding on Christo's coattails that we were able to go and meet with Alexei, and it was my job to essentially pitch him both on why a documentary was valuable, but why it should be us to make that documentary. And I was successful in that effort, and it was one of these things where the stars aligned and we started shooting the film immediately. knowing full well that Navalny was planning on going back to Russia. This had always been his prerogative, and we had.
So, wait a second, you went to pitch the film, and then you just stayed and started making the film?
It was probably November 12th, 2020, when I first sat across from Navalny in the shadowy little cafe in the Black Forest of Germany. It had very much the mise-en-scène of our own little spy movie. Like, this is where these type of meetings should take place. And for me, it was I was naive to the risk, and I didn't know how scared I should be. I think that's really why I was able to do it, because I was just sort of moronic about it, and I didn't realize what it meant to be in witness protection. I didn't at first see Navalny's security detail and all of these things. But we had that first meeting, and it was sort of my job to convince him the virtues of the medium. This is a man who is a politician, and perhaps his great genius is his mastery of media, his ability to contort social media, YouTube, these sorts of things to further his political messaging. So the question immediately from the very first moment was, how is he going to weaponize us? How are we going to be part of his political brinkmanship? And that question was on the very forefront of my mind from our very first encounter through to the editing of the movie. And